All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's installment of the Regional Report, a GPEC virtual series. All right, today's webcast will focus on elements of the electrification ecosystem, including consumer trends, electric vehicle advancements, and charging infrastructure. We're going to learn what innovators in the region are doing to advance the industry and how Greater Phoenix is uniquely positioned to capitalize on the increased popularity. Thanks for joining us. My name is Sperling. I am the founder and managing director of the Social Television Network, STN. If you're not familiar with STN, we are a local media company based right here in downtown Phoenix. As you see there, we have a streaming network that you can download on the App Store or Google Play. All of our shows and segments focus on local leadership, community growth, and actionable solutions, hence this terrific partnership we have with GPEC and the virtual series. Some upcoming events I do want to mention for GPEC, we've got an exciting ambassador panel on transforming places and spaces. That will be on Wednesday, May 26th from 11 to noon via Zoom. And to learn more about getting involved with GPEC, you can reach out to Nicole there. Her email is on the bottom of the screen there, or you can find her on LinkedIn. Okay, today's webinar will run for approximately 1 hour. Audience members are muted and without video. This webinar is being recorded, will be shared on the GPEC website and social media. Now, you may submit questions using that Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen there, but due to time constraints, we may not be able to get to all those questions. Should you experience any technical difficulties, please just try logging off, logging back in. That usually fixes it. And then we've added a new feature, closed captioning. So to enable that on your screen, just click the CC button. You can see it there at the bottom of the screen there. And of course, we invite you to share this information on social media. Please feel free to tag GPEC and use the hashtag GreaterPHX together where appropriate. All right, we have 4 fantastic panelists joining us today. Let me read them off real quick. I'd like to welcome Marc Coltelli, Global Energy Strategy and Operations Leader. He's the e-mobility lead at EY. Ryan Johnson, CEO and co-founder of Culdesac. Jim Maury, he is the president and co-founder at Zero Electric Vehicles. And Paul Rivera, he is the CEO at ElectraMeccanica. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to kick things off with Marc. Marc's going to give us a little presentation, and then we're going to bring in the rest of the panelists to have a discussion on that presentation. So Marc, thanks for being here. I'm going to send it over to you, and I know you have a video and a slide you have prepared for us. So the floor is yours, Marc.
Thank you, Eric. I think we've got a video playing. Good morning, everybody. I'm absolutely delighted to speak with you all today on the topic of e-mobility and electrification more broadly. So I just want to start off by saying, my role as e-mobility leader, I cover, the global landscape, if you like, of all of the activities that is happening across the world on electrification more broadly. And let me start by saying, we know and we see, globally that if we from the video you saw the climate impact that we're having on society today. Most of the emissions, over 70% of the emissions that we generate, come from transportation, and of those emissions, a lot of them come from fleets, which operate at 60% part of all of that total vehicle block. And what we've seen more broadly across the globe and Europe in particular is the electrification of transport journey has begun. We're seeing a number of OEMs transition all of their vehicles to electric. Every week we see new announcements from car manufacturers telling us that from 2025, 2030 and onwards, that their vehicles will become electric. We're also seeing cities and countries in Europe banning internal combustion engine vehicles, and this is really accelerating the adoption of EVs more broadly. When we look at the energy component, we're also seeing that the way we use energy today is changing. We have a grid infrastructure system that was designed 100 or so years ago, and it wasn't thought through in terms of the demand that we're seeing of the network and electricity today. That has changed the way that we're going to operate. We're seeing decentralized energy be a huge component of what our electricity infrastructure in the future will look like. We're seeing solar and renewable generation become prevalent on the network to really help decarbonize the electricity grid system. We also work in an environment, I've spent 20 plus years working in utilities previously, where as a utility operator, one of the factors, if you like, is really understanding the load and the demand management on the grid system. In a world where we now see electric vehicles coming into the system, there's going to be so much uncertainty from grid operators in terms of when people will charge, how they will charge, and what that actually means for the demand of electricity going forward. But equally, we're seeing a lot of components that are coming together. We see there on the graph, this isn't just about energy companies. This is about the whole ecosystem, whether it's the car manufacturers, the charging operators, the energy retailers, fleet managers, the OEMs, government, consumers. We all have a role to play in this electrification journey. Not one entity, in my opinion, can solve for this. But what we are seeing is a real focus now on how do we get to the electrification agenda that we need as a society. So, for us, it's really important to understand that as we move forward, we have to start to provide simplicity for customers. So there's a lot of issues right now around range anxiety. When will we charge? How will we charge? It's quite simple in the fact that as a internal combustion engine car, we drive them around, we fill them up with gas, we wait for the yellow light to come on, and we find the nearest gas station, and we go fill the cars and vehicles up. In a world where all of that is electrified, where are the availability of chargers? We're seeing new business models enter the mainstream, whether that's retailers, shopping malls, all of the convenience stores that we would be used to, now start to reposition their business models to think about charging infrastructure on site. I touched upon earlier around fleets. We see that fleets will be one of the key movers in the market, and one of the first movers in the market. We're already seeing that in Europe. As I mentioned before, the emissions that are generated globally from transportation is significant. When we look at fleets, they generate, they travel the furthest, and as a result, they generate the most emissions. So when companies across the globe are looking to, have a real impact on their climate change commitments, their ESG goals, fleets is going to be one of the first areas that they tackle. And obviously, from a fleet perspective, is how do you transition tens of thousands of vehicles across the ecosystem to electric? It's going to be hugely important how we do that, to give confidence both for consumers, for government and regulators, as well as the fleet operators. And what that's going to do is going to make a significant demand on our grid operations. So grid resiliency is going to be a key component of that. So seeing utilities manage how the grid infrastructure will evolve over the next few years is going to be key. looking at the US market, it is obvious and it's clear that there's a patchwork, of different utilities across each state. So, we need to really make things easy and accessible, not just for our fleet customers, but also our domestic customers as well. So, having this ability to be able to charge when they want, when they need it, is going to be absolutely crucial. What we also see is that there's a lot of education that needs to happen for consumers alike. What rate am I going to get when I charge? Do I have to set up an account? How am I going to do this? We know that most charging will take place at the home, but that's not going to work for everybody. So for us, it's really about how do we create an ecosystem where charging can take place both at the home or at the workplace, but also across the various corridors across the US as we travel, with our vehicles. But for me, I think it really falls down to sort of 4 or 5 things that we're seeing in the market, and specifically for the US to really focus on. So public charging is absolutely going to be at the heart of that. Making it simple for consumers to be able to access charging when they need it. Home charging is also going to be very important, because most people's tendencies, with cell phones and other things, is to really, as soon as we put them down on the side table, we plug them in. It's going to be no different with cars and vehicles. You're going to drive them home, and your automatic instinct is going to be to plug them in. So really having smart charging as part of the home ecosystem is going to be important. I touched on commercials and fleets. We're going to see an increase in the way that we adopt commercial and fleet vehicles to electric going forward. Think about public transportation, school buses, all of the things that we enjoy today. Those are going to be the first movers in this ecosystem. I mentioned the energy and the grid services. It's going to be totally dependent on having a resilient grid, so that when we go to charge, the ability to charge is available. And that's also going to mean smart systems within the grid infrastructure to be able to manage both the load as well as the availability. And as technology evolves in the future, and we see the battery performance and the battery technology evolve, you're going to get two-way charging. So it's not just going to be about charging your vehicles, but it's also about how do you discharge your battery and provide an ecosystem of energy management and generation for homes and businesses going forward. The last area that I mentioned was around education and awareness. We see that there are a number of communities out there that really need to feel that they are going to get a similar experience to driving their gas powered vehicles currently. So how do we help educate our communities on how electric vehicle adoption will work for them? Also, how do we provide social justice for everyone to be able to access electric vehicles going forward? If you think about the millions of vehicles that are on the road today, in the future these will all be electric, and how do we provide the provisions for everybody in that ecosystem? So I've said a lot, and I've tried to give you guys a bit of a level set on what we're seeing in the market right now. For me, we are seeing a huge opportunity in the US. We've had a number of announcements from the government and federal agencies are really pushing and promoting EV adoption and providing investment and funding to really drive this. We're going to see huge activity in the US going forward on this topic. We have many lessons that we can learn from Europe and from places like China, which have probably been on that journey already for a year, 18 months. And I'm super excited to see how we react here in the US and start to evolve and develop our plans to electrify our transportation system. So I'll hand back to Eric. Thank you for the opportunity, and look forward to answering your questions on Q&A.
Thank you so much, Marc. Thanks for teeing us up. What I'm going to do now is invite the other panelists to join us, Ryan, Jim, and Paul. And Paul, we'll start with you, if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit more about your role and what ElectraMeccanica is. And I know you guys just broke ground recently in Mesa, so that's really exciting news for everybody on this call.
Yeah, sure, Eric. Thanks again for having me. Thanks to the other panelists too, and thanks to the listeners out there. So for us, our company ElectraMeccanica is a unique company. We make a three-wheeled single occupant electric vehicle called the Solo, and very different than any other electric vehicle out there because a lot of electric vehicles are super costly, first of all, right? And they're all sedans, and they all have they're crossovers or the sedans, and they all have 3 or 4 unused seats a lot of the time, right? So our vehicle is focused on 100-mile urban driving range. It's got a top speed of 80 miles per hour. It's focused on most of the things that people do by themselves, whether that's commuting to and from work in urban environments or going and getting a cup of coffee, going to the gym, getting your groceries, those kinds of things. And the last part about our vehicle is that it's just perfect for fleet applications in and around franchise food delivery, or groceries or pizza kind of delivery. And our vehicle is perfect to be shared, right? So whether it's in high-rise residential complexes or in college campuses, it's the perfect vehicle to be shared. So that's a little bit about our company. We did just break ground in Arizona just 2 days ago, but we also have a manufacturing facility overseas as well. And we're about to deliver vehicles in the US market imminently here.
Awesome. All right, Jim, tell us a little about Zero Electric Vehicles.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting Zero into this particular panel. We're based in Tempe, Arizona. We've been in business now for about a year. We just actually had a reveal of our 2 products at the Exponent Track in Phoenix, and we brought out our delivery van Class 3 electrification kit and demonstrated that to our partners and customers along with our Triton chassis. So we have a passenger vehicle chassis. It's a dual motor chassis, highly efficient, modular that we can put under any hat. And so we're going to market with our electrification kit. And I was just thinking here about Marc's comments, and I think he did a fantastic job really outlining the challenge we all have in the entire electrification journey. So ZEV is really about the right partnerships, being very inclusive about how we go to market, finding the right collaborators to bring this journey to life. And because it's a complicated one and it requires I think a lot of patience and a lot of understanding of how we're going to move forward and get these fleets moving into this whole electrification process. So we're excited to be here in Arizona. We're growing into a 108,000 square foot facility. We're going to be starting our manufacturing of our electrification kit sometime in Q3. And again, happy to answer any questions going forward.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jim. All right, from electric vehicles to carless, no cars. Ryan, you tell us a little about Culdesac.
Yeah, I'm Ryan and I run Culdesac, and we build car-free neighborhoods. We're based here in Tempe, and we're building the first car-free neighborhood built from scratch in the US, and that's Culdesac Tempe. It's 1,000 residents that don't have cars or parking, and it opens next year.
That's awesome. And I invite, for those of you on the call, after this, head to the website. You can check out some renderings. Looks really cool. All right. Let's see. Paul, let's start with you. One of the things that Marc was talking about, and it was on the top headline of that, was reducing barriers to EV adoption. So in your journey, what have you seen have been some of the most common barriers, and ones that, again, I'm outside of the electric vehicle space, I'm learning about the electric vehicle space, ones that the general public would see as something that, okay, we can all maybe play a part in overcoming some of those barriers?
Yeah, for me, it's been 2 things in our case, right? For us, it's been attainability of the vehicle, right? Because vehicles traditionally in the electric vehicle space have been very costly, right? And I would just say that, and I'm an advocate, right? But going and buying a vehicle today has typically meant that you had to shell out, upwards of $70,000 to go get a nice vehicle, or more than 50, right? And it's been an expensive endeavor. So one has been just the cost. Secondly, it's been the charging infrastructure. People worried about whether or not they're going to get range, whether or not they're going to be able to charge their vehicles and things like that. So I think that, by the way, I think that we are overcoming both of those barriers, right? And the OEMs are doing a great job and they're overcoming those barriers. But at the same time, those OEMs are dealing with legacy supply chains. So they're trying to package, new platforms into their existing vehicle, designs, let's say. There's startups like ourselves that are trying to think outside the box and come up with new models on how you electrify and how you redefine transportation. So in our case, a vehicle, it's all about everything you do by yourself, and driving solo is perfect, right? At a price point of $18,500 for everything you do by yourself within a 100-mile range, rethinking the way you drive, that's perfect, right? And that's how you overcome these barriers.
Jim, same question. What are some of those barriers that you've seen in your journey?
So yeah, I like Paul's comments, and but our problem, and I actually own an EV, so I struggle with range anxiety, charging infrastructure every single day I drive it, and I'll be honest with you guys. So I mean, the entire process, I think, needs to be looked at more holistically. So what we're finding is that, the entire energy system needs to be inspected before anybody starts putting a vehicle together. And what we're finding is that what we call in the engineering world is parasitic loss. So there's a lot of loss coming off the electrons that we all store in battery systems today. And, you'll have a range estimate of 250 miles, but your actual vehicle will only go about 190 miles. That's a significant, difference when you're actually trying to, get to your journey and feel comfortable before you have to find a charge station. So range anxiety is real, charge station infrastructure is real. And we need to do a better job, I think, engineering these systems to where we look at the entire energy model more holistically. We understand the thermal characteristics of batteries, and we really manage, how we discharge the electrons back into propulsion and manage the interior systems of these vehicles. So we have, the ranges set up for every individual use case. And if you're, going to grandma's house, that's a different use case than the fleet guy who's trying to do, 50 miles in his delivery load and, get back to charge before the end of the day. So, these are all different problems that we have to solve. And Zev is actually taking a very unique approach to it because we're really focusing on the software enablement side. So we're bringing a lot of the systems that we can actually, build inside the vehicle, make them talk to the cloud. So we understand what kind of, consumption we're seeing on an actual drive mile basis. And we can understand, what do we have to do with HVAC? What do we have to do with other energy systems that are now consuming a lot of the power from the main battery system that, really affects our range. So we're taking a very unique look at it. And we have some very compelling ideas and some compelling technology that we're bringing to market, which I think is going to get us, beyond some of this range anxiety. And again, we have to solve that problem for fleets, for, the consumers. And as Paul said, I mean, even for your vehicle, it's great for the price point. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for, how do I optimize my dollar per mile? And that's what you're trying to get out, of these EVs. And we have to find a comparative capability to the ICE model before we start transitioning.
All right, Ryan, I'm going to let you weigh in. Hearing all of that and talking about Culdesac a little bit, what are your thoughts on the barriers to getting the electric vehicle adoption going? And then you have a similar thing, a solution over here saying, well, this is a carless community, so we're trying to alleviate some of those concerns.
Yeah, so the future of cities is building neighborhoods for people, not cars. And cars will, of course, still play a role. But there's a huge opportunity to rethink how cities work to put people at the center. And people want tree-lined streets, they want safe bike paths, they want a coffee shop they can walk to. And the way to make all these things happen is to take space away from cars and give it to people, specifically to pedestrians, to bikers, and to buildings. And the community of the future is a place where people want to spend time in, not somewhere they want to drive through. It's a vibrant destination, not a sea of asphalt. And these types of walkable neighborhoods are already enormously popular. Over 60% of millennials want to live in a walkable neighborhood, but because we've built so few, only 8% of people in the US do live in a walkable neighborhood. And the future is building a lot more neighborhoods that are designed for people, not cars.
So Ryan, would your ideal future be somebody living in a community like Culdesac and then jumping in their solo when they need to go somewhere?
Yeah, so Culdesac still has a role for cars. People get around with bikes, with scooters, and also with other modes such as ride sharing and car sharing.
Marc, let's bring you back into the conversation now. Do you think the market adoption has been a lot slower than you anticipated? I know part of that is accelerating adoption here. And are you seeing it trending slower than you initially thought maybe 10 years ago?
It's a great question. I mean, here in the US, I mean, yeah, it's certainly behind what we're seeing elsewhere in the world and in Europe, and really reflecting back on some of the comments that Paul and Jim have been making is this whole concept of range anxiety is part of that slow adoption. In Europe, we're seeing range anxiety become range confidence. So seeing the infrastructure being built and being developed, seeing the technology of vehicles improve. I mean, I don't want to quote any particular brands, but we are seeing cars coming to market now with in excess of 500 miles, on a full range. When we really think back, if we just exclude fleets and commercial vehicles, I mean, when do we really drive 500 miles on one go? We like to know that we have the ability to do that, but the reality is that most journeys are 10, 15 miles on average per day. So I think for me, it's really about how do we start to educate the communities, to really see the benefits of not just electric vehicles, but electrification, of our infrastructure system, and move away from the context of anxiety to confidence.
Paul, when you see, you mentioned a startup in this space. When you see the competition, if you will, create new models, create new vehicles, what's one of the things that goes through your mind? Are you excited at the developments? Are you excited at the acceleration because it's good for everyone? Or do you see the competition roll something out and think, oof, we've got to get there?
No, I'm excited. I think it's great. First of all, I think that Jim and I are going to get along just fine because Jim, first of all, I'm an engineer also. And Jim gave you the engineering answers. And I was giving you the high level answers from a market standpoint, and Jim was giving you the engineering answers. And together, he and I are going to get along just great. Yep. Okay, so that just worked out great. Now, to answer your question, no, I'm not concerned by the idea that there's more competitors coming in. I'm not concerned by the fact that there's innovation out there. Like I said, the larger OEMs need to figure out how they're going to deal with legacy supply chains and everything like that. When you think about the question that you just posed to Marc, the fact is that right now we're riding the economic tailwinds, right? I think it was McKinsey that says we're in the economic tailwinds. Right now, consumer attitudes have changed. We are, thanks to Tesla, thanks to Elon, the fact is that all of these OEMs today have now shifted, and there is all this new technology out there. And the cost of common off-the-shelf components has come down. And the fact is that the price per kilowatt hour has come down on battery pack technology and cell technology, right? And if you look at what others are saying, whether it's Frost & Sullivan or Automotive News is predicting that by the time you get to 2030, EV sales are going to outpace internal combustion sales, right? So this is where we're headed. And I'm excited by the fact that the market's headed in this direction.
What do you feel like the consumer is looking for the most? Because what I'll do is I'll get excited about electric. I'll look at the GMC electric Hummer and go, wow, that's amazing. I want that. And then I'll go to your website and see the Solo and I think that's the opposite. And I want that too. What are some of the demands that are you're seeing from the consumer in when it comes to producing EVs? Is it look? Is it style? As Jim mentioned, is it range? What's kind of top priority at this point?
Well, it's all of those things. And by the way, I just had this exact dilemma myself over the last 3 weeks, right? Because not even 10 years ago, or not even 5 years ago, you didn't have the options, right? There weren't that many EVs out there. And over the last 3 weeks, my wife and I were sitting there trying to figure out what we were going to buy as the next car. And we spent 2 weeks looking through different electric vehicles, right? And it does come down to what do we want as far as range? What do we want as far as being able to fit, our family? And we want what luggage space can we fit? All the same things that you would typically ask for an internal combustion engine vehicle, right? But now for our family too, on top of the Solo that I have in my driveway, the e-Roadster that I have in my driveway already from my own company, right? But these are the things that the consumers are asking now. So it is all those things. It is everything from the range, the technology that's in the vehicle, the comfort features, and then just the typical, creature comforts.
Jim, from the engineering perspective, we talked a little bit about battery performance evolution. Will we get to this point where that range anxiety is no longer an issue because of the performance of the battery? Are we going to live in a world where the sun will charge the battery and we have no issues at all with that, or water will charge it? Where's battery evolution?
Well, if you can solve that, Eric, I'd say you're going to be the next gazillionaire. So
all right. I think I got something to aspire to. All right.
But battery technology is obviously evolving, and we're very fortunate to have our chief scientist is Dr. Kanani. He comes from ASU, and he's probably one of the leading battery experts in the entire industry. And so we've had a great opportunity to really study and understand various chemistries within battery cells, whether it's a cylindrical, pouch, or prismatic, and we're looking at different ways that we can actually manage thermal coming off the batteries, which is really the most important. It's really about discharge and charge, and the speed that we really want to charge the batteries is critical. We want to get our customers up and running as fast as we can, but we also want to preserve the battery life, and you can't do everything with the battery. You have to manage certain parts of it. You have to know where the hot spots are within the batteries and protect that battery as best we can, because again, remember, these are explosive. These electrolytes and these batteries are very explosive. So we want to make sure we have a very safe platform, but battery technologies will continue to improve. Energy density is going up. That's a great thing. I mean, Tesla's doing some interesting things in the cylindrical cell world. I think pouch cells have a certain play in the world where they can actually manage, heat very well and discharge very effectively. And we're using a pouch cell, for example, in our class 3 application, and it's a great battery system for that application. It has great energy density, and it also manages thermals, incredibly well. So we've got some great, I think, new technologies coming out. The biggest part of ZEV, and I will say this for anybody moving forward, it's all about cooling the batteries. You have to manage the battery in its I'd say operating temperature band that is optimal for that battery itself and the battery pack. And so for us, we want to make sure that we're providing a safe experience for our customers, and we'll see better electrolytes and safer electrolytes coming forward with solid state. But I don't see a magic battery out there, Eric. I just don't see it. We're stuck with physics, and we're stuck with precious metals and precious materials coming out of this earth. And at ZEV, we're very fortunate to have the right people around us that we're trying to do everything we can to protect the earth from precious metal mining. I mean, there's only so much of it, and we got to make sure we don't continue to bleed the earth from the precious materials that we were born with, and we want to find different sustainable ways to actually move vehicles forward in the future.
I'm glad you brought that up. What are the trade-offs in advancing some of these sustainability efforts? And we'll delve into that more in a moment. But Ryan, let's bring you in now. Talking about those sustainability efforts. I mean, being in on conversations like this, I assume this is exciting for you because this is all about sort of advancing into sustainable models and tapping into awareness, general public awareness that these things are happening, and then seeing something like Culdesac is very appealing.
Yeah, walkable neighborhoods are the most sustainable neighborhoods, and they're places that people want to live. So take the West Village in New York. People move to the West Village because they want to be part of a vibrant, walkable community, but it's also much more sustainable than a suburban counterpart. The largest source of carbon emissions for most households is their cars. In Culdesac Tempe, a 1,000-person car-free neighborhood we're building here will be one of the most environmentally sustainable communities in the country. Tempe residents will emit 50% less transportation-related CO2 emissions than the average car owner.
We've got some questions coming in, and forgive me, I'm going to read these cold. Marc, this one's coming in for you. Considering your comments about the need for reliable power, what does this mean for Texas, who is not on the U.S. grid? Recent events come to mind. Will this remove or be a detriment to Texas from future consideration seeking new locations?
Yes, really good question. I mean, clearly government and regulation are going to play a big role, and back to my point that I made at the start, this is all about grid resiliency, so it's hugely important that we have, a country level, a stable and reliable grid. People will want to charge, know that it's there, know that it's available, and we don't want to see situations where the availability of electricity is compromised because the right legislation and the right incentives are not in place. If we're going to get to a world, countries, adopting electric vehicles, we need to make sure that all the mechanisms are there to incentivize that, right? Because, you know, we are seeing in some countries across the world where, you know, because of maybe lack of education and lack of understanding, is the opposite has happened on policy. You know, people are being taxed on owning electric vehicles, or people are being disincentivized of owning electric vehicles, and clearly, you know, we need to find the right balance for that. So for me, it's about having, you know, the right policies, the right regulation, you know, and the right incentives to really, you know, drive that.
Great. Paul, question coming in for you. You mentioned legacy supply chains. What do you see changing on the supply chain front to enable EV OEMs? And forgive me, I'm in my OEM. I've heard it thrown around a couple of times.
Equipment manufacturers, original equipment manufacturers.
All right. So
Ford, General Motors, those guys.
Got it. How do you see changing supply chains to enable EVs, electric vehicles?
You know, I mean, I think you're starting to see it. I think that they're becoming a little bit bolder, right? But you know, like look at Ford Motor Company with the Mach-E, for example. That is bold for Ford Motor Company to do that. And by the way, I love that vehicle. I think it's a great step forward for them, right? But typically, what happens is they already have wheels, and like all of these OEMs, right? Original equipment manufacturers like Ford and General Motors and BMW and all of those guys, they already have vehicle platforms, and they already have body panels, and they already have chassis, and they already have wheels, and they already have rims, right? So it's hard for them just to say, well, we're just going to stop using all of that, and we're just going to create something completely new and completely out of the box, and we're just going to start all over. It's easier for them to say, as in the case of Audi, we're going to try to cram a whole new electrified platform into an existing platform. And, you know, with no disrespect to Audi, but look at what's happened with them with their e-tron, right? Their e-tron is crammed into their existing platform. And to Jim's point, the range suffers when they do that, right? You don't get the very best performance. You don't get the very best range on it. So you're spending a lot of money to buy a vehicle that has range issues and things like this, right? So it's just, how do you move away from that? The OEMs, they need to be bold. They need to say, okay, well, we're gonna move away from those existing supply chains, from those existing body styles, from those existing legacy models, and go and do something different. And somebody like Ford doing something like the Mach-E is different. And I think Maury with General Motors is starting to try to do that too. She's even changed the look of the logo for GM, right? So she's trying to do that, but it'll take time because they move slower, right? And that's just the facts, right? So the startups, it's a little different because they have the ability to think outside the box. They have the ability to do something clean sheet, and that's the difference. That's the advantage.
Yeah, I love that. And you just describing the manufacturing process kind of lends into this question that was prepped for you. Can you speak to why Greater Phoenix was the right region for your EV manufacturing?
Easy. I mean, it came down to between the Nashville, Tennessee area. After a long search, it was 14 months looking, by the way, and we looked at 7 different states. But then it came down to either the Nashville, Tennessee area because of the existing, automotive industry and supply chain that was already there, and the talent pool there, or Phoenix and Mesa and Arizona. And frankly, just the state of Arizona and Governor Ducey and Sandra Watson and the Arizona Commerce Authority and Chris Camacho and GPEC, they put together the best overall proposal for us. And the piece of land that we have in Mesa is a beautiful piece of land just north of the airport. And then you combine that with the fact that our target market for the kind of vehicle that we have is perfect for the West Coast of the United States, right? In the Los Angeles area, San Francisco, Seattle. And so from a logistics standpoint, it just made more sense to be out here. And the very last piece for us, as I said during our groundbreaking ceremony the other day, is that the 5 municipalities, and I'll just give a little teaser on it, I don't want to get too far into it right now, but at our groundbreaking ceremony the other day, the 5 municipalities around the Phoenix area have agreed to work with us through the help of GPEC and with APS and SRP to test the sharing program for us. And we're very, very keen as part of our ecosystem to be able to share those solos. And so there's more to come on that later, but that was one of the very, very last pieces of the puzzle for us that was a tipping point. And for that reason, we're so excited to be in Mesa, Arizona.
Yeah, that's exciting. Jim, same question, just operating here in the greater Phoenix area, the advantages.
Well, we're kind of coining the Arizona area as Electric Valley. So I actually came out of the Silicon Valley in the software industry, and so this is to me like an Electric Valley. It's an amazing place for sustainability. We've got great solar, we've got wind projects. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that we can actually use energy to effectively build mobility. So we love the ecosystem. We love the collaboration. We have a great relationship with ASU. They've been a significant partner of ours. We actually have a capstone program that we're doing with ASU. And so we love the university. We love the kids coming out. We also are working with GCU, Grand Canyon University. So we have a great relationship with them. And we see, the young talent coming out of these universities now are really focused around energy, sustainability, and some great engineering minds. And it's going to take some new engineering talent, some fresh ideas, I think, to really break the barrier here away from some of the OEs. And I just want to go back to Paul's point too, if you don't mind, just on the supply chain. The supply chain is challenging, partly because there's only a few suppliers out there that are actually developing much of the technology, whether it's an EV motor or battery technology. And if you're not in those mainstream connections or partnerships, you have a much harder time. So a lot of the OEs have first mover advantage because they have these relationships, they have the buying power, and it takes a lot of buying power to actually get into an allocation of 1,000 motors or 10,000 modules, if you will. So you really need to find a way, clever ways to actually get in and compete effectively and really drive those partnerships in supply chain so we can bring EVs to market. Right now, there's a significant shortage, and batteries are going to be short. Tesla owns the entire cylindrical cell model. They're buying everything that's being produced, and it's hard to find them. So we're going to have a hard time, I think, moving forward, just because the scale on the back end of supply chain isn't quite there yet. And this goes to Marc's point as well. There is that slowness in EV adoption here in the US. And I think partly it's due to the fact that we just are having a hard time to get supplies.
Well, Jim, you and I will get together. We'll figure out that water-sun combination to
we figure that one out, man. We're gonna be hanging out in the Bahamas, as well. So,
hey, Ryan, we just talked about Electric Valley here with Culdesac. Again, something that you could probably try and institute anywhere in the country. Why greater Phoenix area?
So Phoenix is the petri dish for prop tech. It's also the petri dish for mobility technology. And so many great innovations in real estate have started here. Actually, where I live, where I am right now, is the original headquarters for Invitation Homes, which is $10+ billion publicly traded company. Also, prior to Culdesac, I was on the founding team of Open Door, and we chose Phoenix as our first market, just like so many other real estate startups have. And we have fantastic partners in Tempe. The job market is great, fantastic partners in local associations. GPEC has been fantastic. We couldn't have picked a better first place.
That's awesome. Okay, questions coming in. Jim, is the battery recycling effort keeping up with the current growth of the EV sector? I think
that's a great question. And, it's matter of fact, we were just talking about this earlier this week when we had one of our battery suppliers in our office. And the whole recycling challenge is going to continue to grow as we see more and more battery usage come in. We have Tesla batteries that have been around for quite some time, and we're going to start to see some of that recycling, I think, have to pick up in terms of not just technology, but where we're going to manage a lot of the recycling that's currently in play, because obviously you've got transportation costs of getting these older batteries to recycling, and then how do we actually recycle the batteries? And we were chatting about this, like I said earlier this week, and for us, we plan on using some of these recycled batteries back in, say, home applications. So in the case of Ryan, well, you can take a lot of these mobility battery systems that have gone through a fairly good life, but there's still some life left in them. And if they're still healthy batteries, why not put them in these home applications and find ways to collect power off solar, collect power off of wind, collect power off thermoelectric. I mean, there's a lot of ways that we can generate power and store that, especially during the night hours when I'm actually discharging from those batteries. And oftentimes I don't have to discharge at high rates, so that battery life can continue to move forward, and we're getting the maximum life out of these batteries instead of just shutting them down after 5 to 7 years.
Paul, I saw you perk up with that question. You want to weigh in too?
again, Jim and I need to get together after this. I really think he and I need to get together after this. Well, what I was going to just, I did perk up only because it is a huge topic, right? And you know, there's the reuse side of it, of course, and then there's the recycling side of it, right? So the reuse side of it's one thing, and then you got to get into whether it's a high energy density battery, is it power, is it energy? How's it being cycled? Which way was it used in a vehicle? Was it a cobalt-based battery, or what was the chemistry of the battery? I mean, there's just so many different elements to how was it used in a vehicle, and then what's the second life use of it once you get into how you can use it, whether you're using it in a home or whether you're using it on a grid or whether you're using it on a microgrid. You know, you can use them with third world countries and things like this too. But then you get into, okay, if it's healthy enough and you can do all that, then there's the cost of the battery management system to make it all work somewhere else in a second life application and getting it there and all of those kinds of things. So, you know, there's a cost involved in all of that, right? Then what about all the unhealthy ones, right? Now you get into the recycling. So there's the reuse side and then there's the recycling side. And so we still have to figure out how you deal with the recycling side. And there are toxins in these, there's a lot of toxins in these batteries, right? And so that's the part that's going to require even more innovation, because there's metallurgical, aspects to recycling these things, whether it's through water, through hydro, or whether it's through pyro, or there's different ways, but that still all needs to be figured out too as time goes on. So it's a very complex situation, and more EVs are being put on the road today. And so there's, we talk about having to solve problems. So Eric, you've already talked about two things that you're going to become wealthy from and help Jim go sit in the Bahamas. You can have a third thing that you're going to become wealthy from if you can figure out all the solutions and the innovations around how you reuse and recycle these batteries.
I'm taking notes, so I know my challenge after this call, and I know the solutions to come up with.
Right.
Question.
And just to note too, I took the high road and Paul went down the engineering path. So yeah, we need to get together and have some coffee.
I like that. Marc, question coming in for you, sir. In your video, it talked about the need for industry collaboration. I'm seeing it happen right now. What type of collaboration do you see will provide the most value to advance the industry?
We're doing it now, we're collaborating now, right? So, so it's working. Listen, I get asked this question all the time, and my answer is always the same, which is not one single entity, not one single sector can solve this. The players that will be successful in this ecosystem are the players that partner, and not partner with one, but partner with many, because as we've just discussed in this panel, you've got the car manufacturers, you've got the utilities, you've got the charging infrastructure players, you've got the consumers, you've got the tech players, you've got the insurance companies. There are so many sectors out there that unless we converge and we bring together all of those elements, no one is really going to solve it by themselves. We're already seeing new business models evolve. We're seeing car companies provide energy services in Europe as part of point of sale of EV. So you buy an EV and they will provide you energy services, whether that's the charging station, whether it's solar panels, whether it's battery storage. We're seeing energy companies become EV lease companies, right? So you go to your energy provider to lease a car directly. So we're seeing all these business models, shift across the ecosystem, and what that really is driving is this partnership between all of those different entities. And I think the guys touched on it. That the car manufacturers have got a big challenge because as they move forward, in a world where they're only producing EVs, one of their big revenue streams previously was after sales, servicing, car maintenance. You're not going to get that. You're not going to have that with an EV. I mean, Paul mentioned, it's 4 wheels and a battery. It's almost like a skateboard on wheels, and then a body shell on top. We know EV drivers that have driven 60, 70,000 miles and have not even changed their brakes during that time because of the regeneration capability. So partnerships are going to be key, and having the right partnerships in the ecosystem is going to be vital.
All right, Paul, question coming in for you. When will we see the Solo cruising the streets of Arizona, and will there be Solo sales kiosks? I know you said there's one in your driveway, but when are we going to start seeing them around here?
Yeah, so there are already retail kiosks all over Phoenix area, right? So you can go to Chandler, you can go to in Scottsdale Fashion Square and Arrowhead Mall. So there's already retail boutique retail outlets to go see it and to arrange test drives. We've already had test drive events throughout the Phoenix area as well, and we're getting ready to deliver the first permanent test drive vehicles into the market as well. Right before we were just doing test drive tours, but now we're actually delivering test drive vehicles into the market as well. As far as when we're going to actually deliver the first keys in the hands of customers, we have a pretty good waiting list on the retail side. And I'll give you the same answer that I give to the investors that ask me this every single solitary day, which is soon.
All right, speaking of waiting lists, Ryan, how is Culdesac shaping up? And then I know you said next spring, right? We'll start to see some of the initial residents move in. What's the plan there? When will we start seeing residents move in?
So we have a long wait list. There's been enormous demand for this. People are really excited for this type of lifestyle, and we're opening next year.
Spring, fall, winter?
Specific month to be announced soon.
Okay, so you're taking after Paul soon. I love it. All right, guys, before we wrap up here, just kind of giving everybody an opportunity to just kind of weigh in a little bit on what we discussed today. I love you felt it happen in real time, sort of that collaboration, that idea generation. So Marc, we'll start with you. You kicked us off, kind of bring us home now, start bringing us home of everything you heard today. And again, the goal of, you said it on your reducing the barriers, making charging easier and more affordable. Like, just kind of wrap us up here.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I see that the future of mobility is going to be very different to what we've experienced previously. I talked about the electricity system, 100 years of an electricity grid system that was designed. Well, it's the same for cars and vehicles. I mean, we've practically been driving, the same concept and type of vehicles for many, many years. And we're now entering a world where that is all changing. The way that we consume energy is changing. The way that we drive and that we engage in transportation is changing, and we need to create a infrastructure, a world, an ecosystem that is now adopting this new change, bringing in innovation, new technology, new ways of doing things. Because I think the word millennials were mentioned earlier. I mean, the kids that are growing up today, they don't think about cars and vehicles the way we did, or certainly of the older generation. And the way that the new generation is thinking about transportation is vastly different. And therefore, we need to adapt to that and change for that.
Well said, Marc. Jim, you can take either perspective. You can go high level. You can come in from the engineering perspective. Kind of bring us home on your thoughts.
Well, yeah. So I'm all about the journey, and which is why we have developed our retro kit for the Sprinter van, or the Ford Transit, is to get our fleet customers early entry into electrification. And they need to understand before 2024, 2025, when vehicles are going to be available, that they understand how to actually model or build an operation around an EV. What they need for charging, what are the charge cycles? How often do the vehicles have to get charged? What do I do with fleet management? What do I do with energy systems? Driver behavior, how do I manage torque maps, from an EV motor to a gas motor? So, that's why we're really focused on an early entry point. We have our electrification kit coming out in July. We're expecting to have vehicles on the road in Arizona sometime in August. And we're super excited to get out there and start that journey. We want to help our customers move quickly and affordably, and get excited about bringing more EVs into their fleet. Every single delivery van that we switch over from a diesel or gas to an electric vehicle will basically plant 350 trees per year in terms of the carbon reduction footprint. So that's a significant, data point for all of us to really understand. If we're looking for more trees and a healthier, future, we want to start the process today, get our fleet customers and operators, comfortable and familiar, so they can accelerate that adoption going into the next couple of years.
All right, I love that perspective, Jim. So, Paul, I'm going to challenge you to stay high level and keep the engineering side over here.
Yeah, well, for me, it's really easy, right? Because I'm all about, how do you get somewhere fast, right? And what I mean by that is that, and I agree with the journey side of it, but it's hurdles, walls, and obstacles, right? And how do you get over the hurdles, knock down the walls, and get through the obstacles? And how do you get there quickly, right? And I believe that's all through the collaboration. I believe it's all about working with other groups and other people. I think that we're fortunate because I will echo what Jim has said in the fact that I believe Phoenix is the greater Phoenix area is just a great place to be able to do that. I believe we have a talented workforce. I think that we have great collaboration with universities there, other companies that are already in the space, and that we're bringing more and more tier 1 suppliers into the area, and we're bringing more and more engineering companies into the area. So I'm just excited about where the future is headed right now. And I just couldn't be more delighted to have been part of this panel and be working with Ryan, with Jim, and with Marc to just push forward on the agenda.
Absolutely. Thanks, Paul. All right, Ryan, your thoughts, your perspective after everything we've heard and talked about today.
Yeah, there's so many different exciting things with electric vehicles. One thing we haven't talked a lot about is electric bikes, another area where this technology can be applied. And, I haven't had a car for 11 years. I have over 40 electric bikes. That's my splurge. And I also sometimes have range anxiety. But the thing with electric bikes is when the battery dies, it just becomes a regular bike. So our residents are using a big variety of mobility methods. There's the light rail electric bikes, electric scooters, car sharing, ride sharing, and all of these innovations help with the downsides of vehicular travel today. Paul's vehicles, you can park 2 in a parking space instead of 1, and that's really noteworthy. If we think about one of the ways we're able to build Culdesac is by residents not all having a large car, we can build it and it looks completely different. And car-free communities, they'll fundamentally change how we build communities today. And it will show what kinds of places are possible when you build for people. And our design illustrates this. It's a completely unique type of place. It's both dense and open. It will have vibrant retail and 1,000 residents. It has 163 buildings. They're mostly 3 stories tall, so it's at a comfortable human scale. It's compact, so you can walk across the whole neighborhood in a few minutes. But over half the neighborhood is open space, parks, plazas, courtyards, and walking path. And in combination, this enables a new type of placemaking, a mixed-use neighborhood people want to walk around and spend time in.
Hey, Jim and Paul, I think Ryan's onto something there. If for that range anxiety, if the battery goes dead, is there?
Let's go ride some bikes sometime soon.
Yeah,
That's right.
You get all 4 passengers to just engage sort of Flintstone style, and then
That's right. We'll look
There
at
you
putting a few pedals in the vehicle platform. How's that?
I can't wait to talk to you, Jim. We're going to make things happen. All right, guys.